I have good news. I have finally managed to set up or to install the wide bar on my Xootr. So the Xootr Stingray is now ready for testing. In fact, I installed everything and I went out for a ride to test the results. And in this video, I'm giving you all the details. This information is everything. It's fully inclusive. I'm giving you the tools, the numbers, the sizes, everything you need to reproduce this modification to the Xootr scooter. Make sure to pay attention and bookmark this video in case you decide to build something like this. However, I cannot guarantee that you will not break your neck based on what you build, so whatever you build is your own responsibility. Before I begin, make sure to check out my previous video on the Suzuki brand. Unfortunately, the algorithm is not showing it much for some reason. But in any case, so I have this Xootr. I have a different model, but it's basically the same thing. There are two things you can do. You can put a clamp on this horizontal part of the T-bar, and you can attach a much wider handlebar to that. And that's what I have done. You could also attach a clamp here and one that is a bit forward leaning, and then you could attach that same wider handlebar there. The problem is kind of short, and this whole T-bar is a little short, so I wanted a rise. And the way I installed it, you'll see it in the video, is giving me about a 2.5-inch rise, which I think is a very good thing to have. Here are the tools or the components I have used. I am giving you links below to everything, so you can just click over and make purchases if you want to. Unfortunately, they have run out of the silver version, which I thought was a better color because the Xootr itself is silver. But on the other hand, I mean, they might get it in silver at some point. Also, if you watch the video at a time when this stuff is no longer available, then just need to find something of its exact diameter. This 25.4 millimeter is really 1 inch. And what the Xootr has, maybe here it has 1 inch, but at the top it's narrower. It's not 1 inch, it's less than that. Both of these holes are 1 inch, and one of them is going to fit the new handlebar very well, but the old T-bar is going to be too small. So you need to pad this hole, this interior part, just like you see it here, but you have to get some shims or you have to make your own. This is the key. This is the key that's used universally. This is a 5/32. I have said this many times. If you're going to be working on bikes, you really need a full set of keys. Don't get just one key. Get this key. I have this key set. I have both the metric as well as the inch-based set. And you absolutely need them because you are riding bikes that are made possibly in Europe, and even if in the US, some of the parts that you install, some of the upgrades are going to have a metric spec. You just basically need it. It's a very useful set to have, and it's very cheap. I mean, it's $9, and I've had mine for at least a decade, if not more. This is the handlebar I installed. This is about 25 inches in width. It's a 640 millimeters. That's just about 25 inches. To be honest, this is a very wide bar. If you want 20 inches, that's totally cool. That would probably be the best. But being as wide as it is just giving me an enormous amount of control. So for now, I think I'm going to keep it. These bars are very cheap. If you get tired of one, you can install another one. But notice that you have to have this sizing. In order to fit into the 1 inch clamp, it has to have a 1 inch diameter as well, which is 25.4 millimeters. This is the part I'm talking about, the center. Know that the bar itself becomes more narrow, and that is always the case. The clamp would not be able to grab onto this part. It can only grab onto the center. So just keep that in mind. Also, you can buy the same bar with a rise. This is maybe a 2 or 2.5 inch rise, in addition to what you're getting from the clamp. This is an even more intense ride. I mean, if you're a very tall person, you might want to consider something like that. And this is their most insane rides, which I really don't care about. For now, I'm just going to keep this. Maybe at some point in the future, I might get a bar with even more rides. But you'll see the installation that I have done. It probably looks the best with the straight bar. These are the shims, and these are about 3 millimeters. Notice that they end at 1 inch, but start at below 1 inch. This is about 3 millimeters inside the hole. So when you look at this hole, you're trying to grab onto, I attach this hole because it has a bigger gap onto the original T-bar, and the shim has to go inside of it. And unfortunately, one shim is not enough. You need it two. And you don't need to get two sets. You can just slice them in a half. You can use a small saw to cut them in half because the width is way, way more than you need. And I'll show you in the video so you can see what it looks like. I bought another shim set as well. It's about the same thing, 3 millimeters. These parts come and go. Sometimes they are available, sometimes it's not exactly the same size. But you definitely don't want to go higher than this. This is 1 inch, and that should be the top. If you go lower here, like a 20 millimeter, then you probably would not need the two pieces. Probably one piece would be enough. So if it's a little thicker, it's not a big deal. You can also make your own shims out of cans. I have used an anchovy can. You can get a soda can. The problem with cutting your own shims is that those cans are very thin. They are thinner than 1 millimeter. So you could get maybe a half of a millimeter, which means you might need a half dozen shims. It's up to you which way to go, but I think it looks more professional to buy shims from a place like Amazon or something that just looks like professionally made. And here I'm showing you on the video how I did the installation. Notice that it's really hard to get the shims in because there is no space here. If you leave even a half millimeter of space, the screws are not going to get this latch on tight enough. You need to really jam it in. So this is a 3 millimeter shim on one end, and there is another 3 millimeter shim on the other. And with the screw being as loose as it is, I really had to struggle to get this in. At first you put the shims on and then you slide the clamp on top of that at the end. And I was attaching the hole that had the most flexibility. This is a more flexible hole than this one on the top. The top was no problem. You can very, very easily slide in the handlebar. It's exactly 1 inch, so you have no problems. So this is the two shims I've finally installed. And notice that I very precisely just pushed the shims all the way here, but not to overhang. There's a lot of shim hanging over here, but if the testing goes well and this upgrade works, then I'm gonna hand saw both of these T-bar pieces along with the shim off, and I'm going to sand it down and make it beautiful, hand file it and all that. I must say it was pretty precise, but it was hard to get the shim in, and I had to hammer it a little bit. Of course, you cannot hammer something this thin directly. So what I did was, you either have a flat screwdriver, a fairly long one, and you hammer that, or in my case, I had a piece of metal that was kind of thin, something that was this product really came with. So there was this piece of aluminum, and I was hammering that. I was hammering exactly at the end, at this point, and that's kind of hard with the hammer directly. So you need to have either a chisel, a screwdriver, or something. And here I am having installed the handlebar initially. But the installation is not 100% because it ended up curving downward a bit. So I needed to rotate it to be exactly like the T-bar itself, properly flat. But then some people prefer a handlebar that's kind of curving downward at the ends. That's a personal choice. You can install it any way you want. And that part of the installation was really easy. I used the measuring tape to measure the two sides to make sure that it is symmetrical. You see that there's a downward curve here, which I did not like. So I ended up rotating it a bit before reinstalling the air-gun grips. And this thing is now, it looks so wide, it's like ridiculous. The width of this installation is the same as the length of the scooter, if not bigger. But that's how Stingrays operate in the wild, so maybe this is something that works. It's going to be quite a job to saw it through, but my plan is to test this installation. This is the full installation. I installed the grips. I rotated the bar forward a little bit, so now you see that it's pretty much parallel to the ground and to the T-bar. Very, very wide, insanely wide, which is going to come in handy in so many ways. Not only is this going to give you more control, but I can install even a big basket for shopping. When you just handle it with one hand, it feels weird because you are grabbing it so far away from the center. But once I cut it off, I think it's going to look pretty neat, almost like a professional installation. I mean, it could look professional, like there are many bikes that have this kind of a double clamp. This screw is the same size. It's funny how everybody is using this 5/30 32 or what it was. I'm giving you a link below for that key, but as I mentioned, get the full set. And here you can see just how wide this is. This scooter is now as wide as it is long. But who cares? I just care about the stability of it. This is the full setup, so I'm ready to go outside with the GoPro installed. I put back the little Brompton handlebar bag that I have. Eventually that's going to migrate up here, but for now I'm just putting it on the old handlebar. That's good enough. And next I'm going to show you the video I shot with this GoPro installation with the Xootr in action with the new handlebar. And here comes the fun part. This is a very steep downhill, but I was hitting the brake the whole time. I do not have a front brake because I don't think it does much. If you do intend on keeping it, then you will have to change the wiring. You will have to increase the length of that cable because the brake will have to be migrated onto a higher handlebar and it's wider as well. So you're just going to need more length. So there's a lot of traffic here and I did not pick up as much speed as I would have liked to. But I immediately felt that there was an enormous difference compared to the stock handling. This new Xootr Stingray is a completely different machine. In a way, you feel the same tiny wheels and just how little traction you have. But your ability to handle it downhill, to handle speed, to corner like the sharp corner, it used to scare me, but it's just, I had so much more security. And also when there are these tiny pebbles on the street and broken glass and or sort of stuff, you just have much more security riding over them, knowing that you have a much better control of the machine. On the other hand, the grip is so wide that you can no longer just squeeze in between two rows of cars as easily as you used to. So you just have to be aware of that. In fact, the bar is so wide, I might just put up a traditional rear view mirror onto it, which would be so helpful. This is another downhill. This is a much more moderate downhill. But even on the moderate downhills, I just feel so much more secure with this wider handlebar. especially if you hit those gaps in between the panels. That used to be a real problem with the stock Xootr bar. And of course, as usual, you just glide and glide. The machine is a bit heavier. I might have added maybe a half-pound of weight. I haven't measured it yet, but the old T-bar has to be sawed first. So when I cut that bar, then I will measure it and give you the exact volume. Here is a nice steep downhill. Unfortunately, there is a sharp cross section with fairly heavy bicycle traffic, so I did not pick up that much speed. But once I got to the bottom, making that sharp left turn was so much better. It was so much easier. It's not even funny. I guess it's perhaps the biggest upgrade that I feel here is the turning. The ability to hold the direction of the scooter, but also around corners. In fact, toward the end of the ride, I was getting quite aggressive and started to take some sportier turns. And one has to be careful because you have this enormous sense of security, but you still have the tiny wheels. You still could slide sideways, although with the wide handlebar, you probably would have a much better way, a much easier way of controlling a slide should you end up hitting a twig or a crack and suddenly feeling that the whole scooter jumps an inch or two to the right or to the left. This is a nice downhill, not too steep, not too boring. I did not hit the brake at all. And then there is a plateau, and here is the really steep downhill. I was hitting the brake. I did not have the courage, especially with these kids, to go all out, but I did not hit the brake as much as I usually do. Here you can see that it's really speeding up, but this is not the full speed. I could go faster than this. I just did not have the courage, so I still have to get used to this. This is pretty fast. This is at least 15 miles an hour, but I have not measured it. And I did some shopping, and I had maybe 15 pounds of groceries on the handlebar, which causes a noticeable disruption when it comes to just balancing the whole scooter. But even then, I could take these sharp turns much better than in the past. And here I let go. This is a mild downhill until I had to slow down and stop because there was so much traffic. But overall, it's just a much easier ride. I assume for a lot of people, the 20-inch wide bar is going to be enough because that's more like shoulder width. If you really want to make an effort and kick hard, then probably that's the ideal bar to get. But on my 25-inch bar, I can still use an inner grip. I can just grab the bar if I want a precise shoulder width grip. But at this point, I just do not feel like letting go of the control I have, the security of the 25-inch wide bar. So it's up to you which one you start with. These bars are really not expensive. Once you install the clamps, they easily come out. So the hard part of the installation was really to mount the clamps onto the stock T-bar, not so much the installation of a wider bar. So feel free to play around with them, and I'm sure you will have more than one handlebar. Just remember, this is dangerous. The faster you go, the more dangerous the ride is. So don't blame me. I'm not taking responsibility. I'm not telling you to modify a scooter. I'm not telling you to get into dangerous experimentations and so on. This is entirely your own game if you do decide to do it. Personally, for me, there is no turning back. This is another really steep downhill, but I had to hit the brake because there were cars zipping in and out. and I'm still feeling kind of uneasy about just how fast this thing can go. But I'm sure that's going to change, and the experience of riding around was absolutely exhilarating. I can't wait for the next trip to the grocery store or wherever I'm going. This was also really steep, this downhill, but I had to control myself because at the bottom I end up going into the park, and that requires a sharp right turn and to come to a complete stop. Here it goes. I took the elevator up and enjoyed the spectacular views. This is what the elevator looks like. They are already open as of the end of April. And you can see just how incredibly wide that bar is. In fact, I did get some curious looks from people, probably partly because the bar just looks so insanely wide and unusual, and also because they kind of see that this is a home installation. In any case, this is the video for now. Make sure to like, subscribe, and so on. And
I'll be back.